All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Jerry Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. What's up, Cody?
Oh my gosh, I was trying to get that in before we went to me, but
Sorry, I should have warned you.
That's just one cough. That's just one cough. All right, we're just going to be at one. Not much. Just another day in paradise here, dealing with still yet a sick dog from being going under the knife for her spaying. So that's always
we got a puppy we got to take in too. What's the recovery time like for spaying?
Well, she had the gastropecty as well, and it's not going so well. So the gastropecty is like for Great Danes or larger dogs where they staple the stomach to the inside of the abdominal wall so it can't flip.
Okay. Yeah. I've heard that's like a problem in dogs, right?
Yeah. So she's looking at like a full 2 weeks in order to recover. So, and it's I'm like watching her like 24/7 right now. So it's touch and go kind of thing, but she'll be fine. It's just not not pleasant right now.
She's not the happiest.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of not the happiest, Jeff Bezos, in our poll, it was split 50-50. We had identical responses between Jeff Bezos then and Jeff Bezos now. So I'm not sure what that says about Jeff Bezos. I guess he's like, he can do no wrong.
Okay. All right. That's interesting because I'm a Bezos fan. So I think that he is, and you know, the funny thing was I saw it today. He came out and said that Amazon is still small.
That's ludicrous.
Maybe it was last night, and pointed to the fact that 90% of all retail transactions still occur in brick and mortars. So there you go.
Is that true?
That's what he said.
Is that a Bezos statistic?
That's a Bezistic.
I don't know if we'll have to look that up. I'll look that up during the stream and get back to you.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you didn't answer our poll, hop on our Facebook page and answer next week's poll. And actually, while you're on our Facebook page, go ahead and enter the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countrystoreoutfitters.com. And while you're on our Facebook page, oh, sorry, I got to announce the winner. I'm like all turned around here.
Are you glued to the release of the Mueller report? Is that why you're distracted?
Like the applesauce guy, Mueller?
Yeah,
he released a report?
He did.
Or was that Musselman's applesauce?
It was the Muesli's Musselman Mueller report.
Sponsored by Mott's applesauce. Anyways, Michael S. Palco. I just announced his full name. We've done this 1,000 times. From Toledo, Ohio. You've got a Country Store hat and copies of our ebooks heading your way. I honestly had no idea that the Mueller report was. I thought they already released that, didn't they? Like weeks ago.
Okay. I guess I'll be our political correspondent for a moment. So William Barr, the new Attorney General, released a four-page summary of an over 300-page report, which was in a lot of, depending on your partisan standing, was either highly dubious or very clearing of the president. And so today they released the full Mueller report with redactions. And I really don't know if there was anything in it. I imagine it's just been like everything else that's come out, which is basically like the president did some shady stuff and so did the people around him, but there was no crime committed. I'm sure that's what is, again, in this 900th report. But
I'm sure they'll be talking about it for another 18 months.
Oh, they'll be talking about it until something else happens. Like, this is what people fail to understand, is that like there's a 24-hour news cycle now, and you have to fill it with something. So
Mueller report 2,
right?
The return of the Mueller report,
right? Until something else comes along, they're going to talk about this. Is it ad nauseum? They're going to talk about this ad nauseum. But then once something else comes along, they'll drop this completely and then move on to talking about whatever the next thing is for 24/7, which will probably be what Marvel will do moving into phase 4. That's what I predict will be the next big news cycle.
I heard Captain Marvel's a new face of the MCU, so I think that's maybe they'll or like bring X-Men in. I don't know. I can't talk about comic movies anymore. Uh, but maybe this will be the next news. Our Facebook poll this coming week is actually about Facebook. So Facebook just announced that they're talking about releasing their own voice assistant. So the poll this week is: would you trust Facebook's voice assistant? Yes or no?
I mean, carte blanche trust is so sketchy. Like, I trust it to give me advice that behooves Facebook. You know what I mean? So, like, if you're going to pin me down to a yes or no, I would say yes, because I would trust it in some respects.
Okay.
Would I trust it to give me an unbiased opinion? No, but I would trust it to give me useful information in the fact that it would benefit Facebook as well.
Agree or disagree? Hop on our Facebook page and let us know. And I guess we can dive right into this week's episode. We sort of talked about some of the stuff we're going to talk about this episode, last episode, but it's good to review it. And also we're going to dive in a little bit to sort of like a preview of next week's episode. So this week we're talking about workflow as it relates to React and serverless. And I mean, honestly, it's workflow as it relates to development in general. As far as Git is concerned, a lot of the practices that we use for React and serverless, we use sort of across the board. But I guess maybe talk about how we integrate Git into our day-to-day workflow.
Yeah, and so as our avid listeners know, I've been doing a companion episode for every one of these, and I'm further ahead in my companion episodes because we did the companion episodes in light of an actual project we were developing for the state of Florida. And so we had to turn that project in. So I got to the point in our companion episodes where I'm way ahead of our main episode. So kind of have to, what I'm saying is I'm kind of like unclear on what I've said in what capacity and whatnot. So if you listen to the companion episode, you may hear some repeat information. But so Git is basically, we talked about this, like when we were talking about technologies involved in the stack. Git is like a foot trail, or trail of every step you've taken along the development path, and it allows you to jump from one footprint back to another, or even jump over to another trail if there was two trails leading you to one destination. One of the most common scenarios for Git is to have what's called a branch, and this is kind of like we're talking about like a trail. A branch for every stage in the development life cycle. And typically there's 3 stages in the development life cycle, which is development or dev, staging, and production or prod. And so we'll kind of go through and talk about what each of those are for in our later episodes. But so Git basically will help you get from one stage to the other in one respect. On a day-to-day basis, Git serves another really important function, and that's helping us keep track of what issues we're working on and how they get merged into the main trail, if you will. So in our workflow, the development environment is actually split into a number of branches. So like I just said, staging has its own branch. We call that branch staging. Production has its own branch. We call that branch master. But in development, every developer on the project has their own branch, which correlates to the development environment. So if we have 3 developers, we have 3 different branches in the development environment. And so what happens is each developer chooses what ticket they're going to work on. We use a system called Redmine, which is an open source project management tracker. Every ticket has a unique number associated with it. So when the developer starts, the developer has their branch called Cody. So I have a branch called Cody. I do what's called I create a new branch. So I create a new branch with Git, and the name of that branch is the actual issue number associated with the ticket in Redmine. So once I check out or create that new branch, I work on that ticket. I do all the work. I finish it. I test it in my development environment, and then I call what's called commit it. Once I commit it, I check out my developer branch, Cody again, and then I do what's called a merge. I merge that topic branch, which is identified by the issue number, into my developer branch, which is called Cody. So then Cody, the Cody branch updates with all the changes that I did in that version or in that topic branch. So again, each developer does that for every issue they're working on. And then at the end of the iteration, which we talked about a lot on this show, iteration is basically just like a week's worth of work. At the end of the week's worth of work, we create yet another topic branch, which is identified by the year, month, and date of the close of the iteration. So the last day of the iteration. Every developer then merges their branch into that new topic branch that identifies the close of the iteration. There's a chance that there's what are called conflicts. So if say me and you, Derry, are working on the same project and we touched similar areas of the same code, we changed the same areas. When we merge it into that end of iteration branch, Git's going to tell us, hey, I've got two different things here. Which one do you want me to use? Or how do you want me to resolve these differences that you both put in? Hopefully there's not a lot of those because they can be a pain in the butt to merge. But once we have all that merging complete into the topic branch, which is identified by the end of the iteration, we create what's called a tag. And basically a tag denotes a release. So this is the release for this week. We then push the topic branch and the tag to the remote repository. And the remote repository is where it makes these available for all the other developers in the project. That's kind of the workflow. Taking it to the next step. Next step is when we actually get into the deployment process. So I can kind of touch on that without getting too much into it. The next phase is for the team lead to check out that topic branch, the merge topic branch, and they do what's called they accept they do a code review on it. And if the team lead says, okay, this passes the code review, they merge it. They merge the new version into the staging branch, and this is where we then transition from workflow to deployment. And I know I just said a lot of stuff, so
yeah, let's touch on some of that stuff. I guess I would say the biggest benefit of doing workflow this way, where you attach commits directly to tickets that you can look up, is that you have sort of a it's easy to look up why certain pieces of code were changed in the way that they were, and it makes development that much easier because it might be 6 months down the line, you're looking at a chunk of code that somebody worked on half a year ago, and if there wasn't a direct relation to a ticket that explains in detail exactly why that code exists, you might have no idea why it's doing what it's doing.
Right, exactly. And again, yeah, you can look up and see, especially when it comes to merge time or resolving conflicts, and you see what someone's, Derry here, who was supposed to solve this ticket. So we need to keep both of the code changes from both of these commits because they touch on the same area of the code, but they're both needed in order to solve two different issues. The really good thing about doing about having modular code and code that's broken off into small tickets is you rarely get conflicts when you're implementing two different tickets. Like you rarely get conflicts. That's the real benefit of that workflow as well.
Yeah, and talk about ticket size in general, because I think we've talked about it in the past. I'm not sure if we've actually talked about it in this series. When you're talking about tickets, what actually is a ticket?
So a ticket is, for us, it's generally one of three things. It's a chore, which is like change the header color to blue from pink, like a chore, right? A bug, whereas like I can't sign in if I have an @ symbol in my username, or the app crashes if I double tap the button. Or finally, a feature request, which is like, as a user, I would like to export the report as a CSV file so that I can load it into other programs, kind of thing.
And so when you split those tickets up into bug, chore, feature, I mean, some people imagine features are, I want to be able to have a gallery of videos. Now that might take a month to build. So is that a good ticket? Or should that be broken down into something that's a bit more manageable?
Yeah, exactly.
What are we when talking about size of tickets, I guess. What's the primary size?
So here's the thing. So bugs, we talked about effort points before, and effort points is like how much effort should go into completing this ticket. Bugs by definition get 0 because bugs should not exist. It's like if you're a Christian, you'll understand this. It's like don't sin, but sins happen kind of thing. And so like you don't get credit for repenting. You just have to do it kind of thing.
It's apropos for Easter week.
Yeah, exactly. So bugs are the same way. Like they're going to exist, but they shouldn't. Like when you assign an effort point value to a feature, you're not saying it's 32 effort points and we're going to have some bugs. You're saying it's 32 effort points to get this feature done without any bugs. So then if a bug comes up, you don't get effort points for fixing that. You actually just have to fix it and suck it up because it was part of the original estimate. Chores do get effort points though, because it's new stuff. You're changing something. Something wasn't broken. It's a new request. It's just not like a full feature kind of thing.
And generally, like you're talking about in terms of avoiding conflicts being one of the major things, but also you don't want to push too many sweeping changes up. And I guess we could talk about like rolling weekly deployments too, but generally tickets should take at most a work week.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, exactly. And that's for 2 reasons. Number one is like you don't want to have a feature that's outstanding from iteration to iteration. It makes it because you should be deploying functional code every week, every iteration. So in our case, it's a week. So if you have a feature that's not complete, it creates a nightmare because you have to back it out of the iteration and keep it open and then merge it into the next iteration without deploying it. It creates a nightmare scenario in that regard. Number one. Number two, like we were talking about, if you have a big ticket, right, it creates a distinct possibility that while you're working on that ticket, you're going to touch on other tickets, and then you're going to have a heck of a time merging conflicts at the end of the iteration. And then finally, if it's so big, there's a lot of room for interpretation, and there's usually more than one feature involved. So we have a maximum, and usually we won't even, we use it as kind of like a placeholder. We'll never put into an iteration a ticket that's more than 32 points. We have like a 64-point value, but that's basically just for like estimation purposes. Before that actually goes into an iteration, we have to break that down into smaller features in order to actually put it into an iteration.
Yeah, and the size of the iteration changes. I know we used to work 2-week iterations, but I think one of the things that we found is that, we usually work 7 days a week, basically. But if you're working a Monday to Friday, that weekend makes it that much more difficult to jump into the work the next week. So it really does make sense to deploy stuff every week as opposed to spreading it out over multiple weeks.
Right. Exactly right. That's exactly right. It's just the 2-week iteration is kind of like standard for IPMs, especially in web development, but it just makes it easier if you can work nimbly. And like we have like a bulletproof workflow where it's built into the development process, where a deploy is literally just frictionless. It just happens as part of the development process. So you're not wasting any time by kind of having a week iteration versus a 2-week iteration.
This is kind of an aside, and it's kind of off topic, but for folks who are tuning in and maybe interested, how do you determine the difference between a bug and a feature that just wasn't detailed? Like the stakeholder might say, I can't enter a username with an @ symbol, but if they never explicitly requested that, how are you supposed to know that they were supposed to be able to do that?
This is where the art comes in to it. Like, this is the $60,000 question. We get asked, we get this all the time, and you kind of have to use like number one, you have to kind of like look at the client. So like if it's a new client who has not worked in software development before, you have to be a little bit more lenient, and you have to explain to them, okay, this is something where wasn't really clear, and maybe I should have asked for more clarification. Maybe you should have given more clarification. And so this time we're going to go ahead and we're just going to count this as a bug, and we're not going to assign any effort points, because effort points equals money. At the end of the day, effort points equals dollars. Time equals money. And so we're going to go ahead and make this a bug right now, but we really need to be more careful and make sure we break this out, because this could very easily be considered a chore or a new feature. And I know you see it as a bug, but like from where we're standing, we have no way of knowing that unless you explicitly ask for something. The other factor that goes into it is how big of a change is it? Like if the quote unquote bug is really like 32 new effort points, you got to be like, listen, man, I know you think this is a bug, but we weren't thinking this at all. Here's what we were thinking. And like, in order to do this, it's a lot of work. So we got to do another feature. The last thing that helps in this that we see all the time is recording these demo videos. So when you actually go about, it's baked into our process as well. When the code is pushed to staging, when it's deployed to staging, and we'll talk about this during the deploy process, staging is where you test. But before you give it to the client to test, you as the developer test it, or usually the lead developer or product manager will test it, and they should record the testing. So the client can see how it's done. So it kind of eliminates a little bit of these like really strange edge cases where the client just kind of goes off on their own and does whatever kind of thing. So recording the demo actually like lets the client see your thought process. And so maybe your thought process is off, but they can see it wasn't for like lack of an effort, that you were just like, hey, we're gonna let this bug fly kind of thing. It was just like a miscommunication thing.
Yeah. I've got a question here. I've heard of build servers before. Are those the same as staging servers, or are they something different?
So like a build environment is, so two things when you hear of like a build environment. So build environments can be used for like internal testing. Again, if you have a really streamlined workflow where you're releasing every week, you don't need a build environment for this type of build environment. But a build environment is like where the dev team can be testing remote changes before pushing it to staging.
Or if you have a QA team who wants to QA stuff before it actually goes to the stakeholder on staging.
Right, exactly. And again, this kind of this is where 2-week iterations come in, because what actually happens in a 2-week iteration, generally speaking, is that the first half of the week, or maybe most of the first half of the week, is used for development. Then you
the first half of the iteration, you mean?
Yeah, excuse me. The first half of the iteration is used for development, and then you deploy to the build environment where QA gets involved and QAs the build environment. And then before the close of the iteration, they send back any bugs, and then the development team fixes those and gets them out to staging in time. So really a 2-week iteration, usually when in software development, a 2-week iteration is really 1 week of development and 1 week of QA. That's usually what it is. So we're doing the same amount of work in half the time. We just have a better system for cutting down on the number of bugs we have. On top of that, because we have a serverless environment, and we talked about this last week, we have a kind of a caked in build environment where we can run the development environment locally, or just flip a URL and we can run it remotely and test it remotely as well, which is basically what a build environment is.
Yeah, I was going to say that's largely what the issue was, is that if stuff worked locally for you, it might have just been some configuration on your machine. But with our setup for serverless and React, that sort of becomes a moot point.
Right, exactly. So the other reason to have a build server is like if you actually have like compile time stuff, or you have like a test runner, or like a Jenkins build, which actually builds your code and runs automated testings. That's sometimes the other nomenclature I hear for a build server kind of thing.
So I guess we've already gone like 25 minutes. I don't know how 25 minutes has already passed. Is there anything else to talk about the Git workflow specifically? Because I know next week we're diving into the actual staging deployment process, which we'll probably touch on a lot of this Git stuff as well.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to, because again, when we have our environment, deploys are really part of the workflow. Although if we try to cover it all in one episode, we'd go for like 3 hours, because we're going to talk next week. We're going to talk about staging and deploying to staging and really dig into what staging's for. And then next week we're going to talk about kind of production, or the following week talk about production, the difference in deploying to production and what the production environment's for. And we're going to try to get into both of those things is actually some best practices or tips for getting your native app into the app stores, which, by the way, is the most annoying part of any of this. So keep that in mind. And so we've covered a lot of stuff.
One thing I meant to ask, or at least have you talk about a little bit, is the idea of tagging and how that allows you to roll back code or to go back to any point in time and see how the code base works.
Yeah. So basically, if you tag everything and shoot hits the fan, then you can very quickly just redeploy the last tag that worked. This is generally in a production setting. It's really good for a production setting. It doesn't really matter if shoot hits the fan in the staging environment. But if you have to like roll back quickly, you can very easily just go back to a tag and deploy from there. Also, tagging is really important if you're what's called like if you're developing software as a service where you have consumers and like you have consumer A who doesn't want to upgrade. You see what I'm saying? They don't want to upgrade. Right. They're happy with version 1.0.2. That 1.0.2 is actually just a tag. So they can stay on that tag from now until whenever kind of thing. Well, your other clients, they want to be on version 2.0 or whatever. It allows you to kind of separate that and say, okay, this client's on this version, this client's on this version kind of thing. Any
final words on Git or the workflow in general before we sign off?
It's funny is that like Git is such a powerful tool and it's so intimidating. It's like one of those things we always talked about with a lot of this stuff is I would encourage anyone as like a prerequisite to software development at all at this point is take a survey of Git, read a book on Git. There's a lot of free books on Git online. Read Git, but know that there's a lot of stuff that Git can do that you probably won't ever have to really worry about doing. And that your actual Git workflow is going to be specific to the team you're working on. And if you're creating your own team, it's imperative that you create your own Git workflow like really quickly. Even if you're a one-person team, define your Git workflow right up front. And then having that survey, you'll know what Git's capable of. So when you define your workflow or get started in a workflow, you'll know where to look to kind of refine it and get involved. But it's one of those things where every workflow is going to be different. If you go to, you get 10 different workflows from 10 different companies kind of thing.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of that, we'll throw some handy links down below. There's a lot of good overviews of Git workflows that have worked in the wild. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to tune in next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode. Hop on our Facebook page and sign up for the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is the lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countrystooreoutfitters.com. And while you're on our Facebook page, answer our question of the week, which, as Cody pointed out, is a little bit vague, but answer with your heart. And the question of the week is, Facebook is talking about launching their own voice assistant. Would you trust it? So hop on our Facebook page, answer that question. You can check out our ebooks on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, iBooks, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. The blog post for this episode will be available at gunnertech.com. The podcast will be available on iTunes. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. Make sure to tune in next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.